No one channel, such as Pillar 1 NPS, can be expected to provide a sustainable solution to retirement funding challenge. The sustainable solution will require the development and use of all feasible solutions in an integrated approach to be efficient and effective. Integration does not require centralized administration, but each channel, however, must be aware of the others and coordinate to its role in creating an overall good retirement. And not as if it's the only system or only part of the retirement system available to people. I will describe 6 components that are feasible today. But before discussing those channels, I'll begin with a reality check. Given a goal of, say, a good retirement, set your goal for retirement. And if you want to improve the chances, there are really only 4 ways to do that. Save more for retirement, that means lowering consumption. Work longer before retiring, that gets more saving, but shorter retirement period. Third, take more investment risk. But risk is real, and therefore you have to prepare sort of plan B for if the consequences of that risk is realized, what will you do? And fourth, improve the income benefits from accumulated retirement assets you have. So whatever pool you have when you retire, get the most benefits you can from those. For working middle class people, particularly, given their saving patterns, the 2 instruments that do really move the needle on that are annuities and equity extraction from the house. Now, turning back to the 6 feasible components or channels in an integrated approach, all of these are feasible, by the way. They need development and for implementation, but everything here that I talked to you about is available and can be done now. This is not a science problem. We don't know how to do it. We know how to solve these problems. It's an engineering one, a challenging one. So the first component is good old Pillar 1 and I guess 0, 2 if you had the old age pension, DB at the NPS in Korea. And all I can say about that one is it's the core. Go for the highest expected returns for risk, as you're always doing, and be cost efficient, and be cognizant of setting goals in your investment strategy. But beyond that, and the other, I guess I would say is don't reach to try to think that you can get more than you can. In an environment of very, very low interest rates, to assume that you're going to get 6, 7% and that's almost a sure thing as a planning device is not a wise move. Number 2 is Pillar 2 DC plans. And DC plans are going to be a very important component to the overall solution. They're gaining all over the world. But there's a lot of improvements that we can do to those plans. If you design the plan correctly, you can actually create a DC plan that's as easy to use as a DB plan. If you have a comprehensive default solution, then the determination of the goal, the investment strategy, the collection of the information about both personal and market conditions as they change, all of that can be done by the provider. And basically, the individual doesn't have to do anything, much the same way as with a DB plan. And so, that really can be done. And then at some point, and perhaps in a few cases when they reach retirement, but generally somewhere closer to retirement, people start to become engaged and they want to actually get involved in the DC plan and try to tailor their outcomes to their preferences and needs. And that's fine. You want a very well-designed, robust tool, but the key design element that has to be there, it has to work without requiring financial knowledge or literacy that they don't already have. Now, that may sound strange when we think of how finance is done now in DC plans, but if you think of other consumer products, cars, when you rent a car, you don't have to go through a handbook or take a course. Why? Because the car was designed with knowing what you as the driver already know how to do. And they put the vehicle and design it so that when you get into it, by and large, you can just get it and use it. You don't have to go through it. Same thing as today with electronics and cell phones. if you have to you can't take it out of the box and use it. If you have to use a manual, we all know that product's in trouble. So we can apply that same thinking to the designing DC plans when people are making decisions. And I've done it, and it really can be done. So this is not a dream. Now, we also have to be sure to have a very smooth transition from the accumulation to the pay down phase. This is a stress time for people as they're coming up on a deadline. And the smoother it is, the better it will work. Now, even though working middle class people are don't have very complex financial situations, they have very different situations when they reach retirement, ranging from being responsible for themselves, depending on their health, all kinds of things. People start new families in their 60s these days, not recommending it. So we need to have a system that is very flexible in terms of giving meaningful alternatives and choice. Third is pillar 3, you might call it. This is personal saving. Any well-functioning retirement system has to provide for uncovered workers. And that's becoming more and more the case as around the world, more and more people are becoming self-employed and are really not part of any member plan. And they still need to provide for their retirement. And of course, you also have people that are members of plans, but that the plans themselves do not produce a high enough replacement ratio to have a good retirement. And so people want to supplement their benefits. A key element to successfully doing pillar 3 is to design a security that people can buy easily at low transaction costs and use and get themselves to a good retirement. Now, as an example, one is about 18 months ago, I gave a talk at the World Knowledge Forum in Seoul on this. They were called selfies, happens to be the particular bond design. And I'll just briefly give you so you have a sense of what I mean by designing a security for people personal saving. Here we see here an example of someone who, let's say, is a young person who's going to plans to retire in 2058. That's at least their guess where they're going to retire. And so what we do is say, you buy a 2058 selfie. If they were going to retire in 2050, it would be a 2050 selfie. It's like going to a shoe store, just picking the size of your shoe. You pick the year you're going to retire. And this is a government bond. Keep that in mind. We all know what those are. And the thing that's different about it, there are two things. One is, and I show it with this picture here on the left, at the time when you buy it, you have a cash outflow. And then the selfies pay nothing all the way up until 2058, the year of you're planning to retire. So that's a very strange looking bond. And then when it gets to 2058, it makes level payments each month or each year for 20, 25 years. We'll get back to that. Okay, so this is the payout pattern. Now, this looks strange for a bond, but this is exactly what you do with a pension. You put your money in today to the pension plan, get nothing, and then when you retire, you get a stream of payments. But remember, this is a bond. Now, to show why this is important revision over, let's say, a standard 30-year bond that I show the payouts on the right, here you buy the bond, you get a payment every 6 months. If 30 years, that's 60 coupon payments. And at the end, you get a balloon payment. That means that person who buys that has to reinvest the money, has to go and do all of this, often in a very small scale, 60 times, and then 61, they get the money. And it's a 30-year bond, but they're not retiring for 38 years. So there's a gap here. They're going to have to reinvest. They don't know when they buy it what interest rates will be at that time. So they're taking very large interest rate risk. So what I wanted to do, I can't go any further into this, but just to say that the element here is the difference between designing a government bond that everybody can understand. It's simple, it's risk-free. You have one transaction. You buy here, you get here. If you actually retire there, you don't need to do anything because you're just going to get the kinds of payments you wanted from a pension. Here, 61 transactions. And so the other thing I would just mention about it is that it's actually indexed not to inflation even, it's indexed to per capita consumption, which means it protects the person against both inflation and standard of living changes, because people are going to want to live the way they live in the latter part of their work life. That feature makes it really simple, though, for people to make a decision of how many selfies they're going to need. Because if they're living on at a standard living of 50,000 now, and they are adjusted for both standard living change and inflation, then they can, without doing any analysis, you just tell them, if you're living on 50,000, then you need selfies that pay 50,000. If it pays $10 per bond, you need 5,000 selfies. End of story. You just need to be able to divide. No forecasting, no figuring out compound interest, nothing. Okay, so this allows people on their own, with no advisor, to be able to make an intelligent and useful decision. So that's what we mean by innovation to solve with the three. Now I turn to the fourth of the 6 components. And this relates to providing more benefits from whatever amount of assets are accumulated. I already mentioned this. And the 2 elements that as they do this are, without increasing risk, are annuities and a reverse mortgage. And I will show you in a minute how big an impact you can have by having a system in which you have a well-functioning reverse mortgage. And I believe in Korea, I like the name better there. It's called home pension. But whatever you call it, we know what it is. And it's a real game changer and something that I feel very strongly there. The 5th one is people are going to be wanting to work longer. They're going to have to in some cases, but they want to as well. And what I'm suggesting is we should systematically organize in a retirement-friendly structure ways for people to, retirees or people who are retiring, to work. They can be contract employees, they can work, organize either public or private sector, specialized jobs that were designed to use the comparative advantage of seniors with a minimal amount of new training required. So seniors are not trying to build a career, they're not trying to look after a whole bunch of other people, including their own children. They have a calm temperament for the most part. And, for example, you want to plant flowers in the parks. They would love to be able to plant flowers. That's a good type of job for that. If somebody has special skills, maybe they were an engineer, they can put them into the high schools where they can help out using their experience and knowledge. Very young babies, ones that don't jump around and run all over the place and are very heavy to carry. It takes attention and caring. They could be very good for helping working mothers. So the basic idea of 5 is that people will work longer. If we could have it organized in a systematic way and be very efficient, that people could count on being able to do that, and we'll get a lot of good use out of people who still want to do things. And not only will this provide the needed cash flow, but it also allows them psychologically to smoothly taper the work experience. So that's the thing. The 6th one is to restructure the retirement system to realize that there's more to life than being in retirement. We don't work our whole life with the goal of retirement. And we all have to deal with the life cycle. Now, I'm not suggesting we turn the retirement system into a lifetime financial planning, but I do think there are elements of the retirement system that should touch or be connected with other parts of the life cycle, particularly in areas of crisis, such as we've experienced, all of us, in COVID-19. And I'll come back to that in a minute. So these are the 6. Now let me give you an example coming back to the annuity and reverse mortgage. I apologize, these are all US numbers, but I think you'll see the point. So I picked the 50th percentile income in the US, $50,000 income. And what's needed in retirement to sustain that kind of standard of living has been estimated to be about 72% or $36,000 a year. This hypothetical has $165,000 in their DC plan. They have $300,000 house. And the interest rates here are not quite the same as they are today, but that again doesn't much matter. And they have Social Security, the equivalent of Pillar 1. And for this person in the US, they would receive about $18,000, almost $19,000 in Social Security. And then they have the bond interest holding on what they've accumulated in their DC plan. because they don't know how long they live. They can only spend the interest, because if they start spending down principal, they might outlive their money. So if you do the two of that, that's a standard kind of investment solution. They reach about 60% of their goal. Not a very good experience. But now, if instead of buying a bond, you use that DC money to buy an annuity, then you have income for life. Even if you live, as the good books all wishes, to be 120, you never outlive your money, you never outlive your income. But in exchange, when you no longer need money, when you've gone someplace we hope better, then you give it up. That seems pretty good. As long as you need money, you get it. And when you don't, you give it up. That's a good trade, it seems to me. And as a result of that, instead of getting the interest rate, you get a much higher number without taking the risk of outliving your money. So introducing an annuity here increases to the 77% of the goal. Now, if we do a reverse mortgage, as is done here in the US, I won't, this is accurate numbers. You can take out a reverse mortgage, and I remind you, there's no principal or interest paid on the mortgage until you leave the house. And so therefore, there's not like a regular mortgage where you might get caught and you can't make the payments or something and you lose the house. And you take that money and you put it in more annuities. Well, when you do that, you get to line C. And what do you see? You combine Social Security with annuity purchases with your DC accumulation plus your reverse mortgage, and bingo, 100% of the goal is reached. I wanted you to see this so you can see just how big the impact can be from the same set of assets by these sorts of ideas to help increase the benefits without really taking any materially more risk. Now, I talked to the last issue, I want to close with this, was the idea of a retirement system being expanded to give some knowledge or connection to the other parts of the life cycle. And what I have in mind here is, I put up here a chart. On the left side is the wealth sources for a person. I've broken it out to during the COVID-19 period and afterwards, and the various assets that a typical person would have. And then the uses of all those wealth sources is there. You can see some people had to borrow in COVID-19. Some people will have to pay more taxes in the future because of COVID-19 transfers. On the other side, they may have gotten some transfers. And then they have their lifetime sustainable consumption, work life, and in retirement. Now, when COVID strikes, as it did, in general, households and society lost wealth. I think we can be pretty assured of that. And the life cycle hypothesis holds that most people like consumption smoothing behavior. They don't want to live on dog food while they're working, and so they can dine on crystal when they retire, or the reverse. They like to balance, if they possible, their consumption. So if you have a negative shock to wealth, it makes sense that you should reduce not only your current consumption, but your future consumption to a new sustainable level. Now, retirement assets, which you already own on the left side, if they were geared toward a higher level of income, it makes sense that you may want to draw down even on some of those retirement assets, depending what they are. This is not a general rule. But the idea would be that it's okay to take some of the retirement assets to balance out your consumption in this part of the life cycle, again, with retirement. But in either case, whether you actually just take it out or whether you borrow it out, one of the things we know about many people have is this note that borrowing against your retirement assets is generally going to be superior to borrowing externally for many people because of the enormous spreads. Just think about it. There are people who are putting money into their retirement plan, and in the United States, a 10-year now is well below 1%, about 65 basis points interest. At the same time, they're going and living almost from paycheck to paycheck, and in some cases they can't even make it from paycheck to paycheck. So they're borrowing money on payday check or credit cards, even not even paychecks, and those are double digit. So if you just step back for a second, it makes no sense for anyone, and certainly working middle class people, to be borrowing at double-digit interest rates and earning in their savings in their retirement account less than 1%. So we need to be clever and design an integration of the retirement system with the other parts of the life cycle. Again, I repeat and close this, is that I'm not trying to turn this into a lifetime planning or a savings account. Rather, recognize that there are certain elements that are natural parts of the life cycle that are connected with retirement both ways, and that we can do a lot for people and provide efficient ways, for example, distributing cash, like the transfers that we've all had to, governments have had to do through this system. So it's even an effective way to get resources to individuals, the ones we want them to get. So those are my 6. In closing, I just want to say what I started. Always look at reality when you're evaluating going forward. And the most important thing is to be, honest with ourselves is what can be achieved. And so thank you very much. And I look forward to a future in which we really address and make great progress on solving the retirement funding problem.